Okay, welcome back then. We're picking up where we left off in early November 1861. Having lifted the siege at Salonica, inflicted a fairly significant defeat on the Austrians there in two separate engagements, and our plan was to press on. As Omar Pasha moving into Kavala with the support of Abdi Pasha's partially constructed force. For the most part, he has received replacements. There are some elements in two of the corps which still need to be constructed. And we've got Abdul Karim moving up into Plovdiv, where he's in a position to both support the offensive in Kavala, a further offensive into Adrianople, and also provide support to Rumelia and Sofia to the north. Now, we are going to have to try and wrap this up in the south as quick as we can. I'm not holding out any kind of crazy hopes that we're going to destroy this Austrian force wholesale. To do that would be absolutely best case scenario. But as we have seen in the past, the Austrians are adept at sort of getting themselves out of rather difficult positions. So we'll see what happens. They had a large reserve built up in Bucharest, which they moved through Plevna, bypassed the fortress at Agosta, and now concentrated at Niš. So what that means, I don't know, but there's a good chance they're going to be conducting an offensive towards Hussein Avni in Sofia district. He has the support of additional volunteer corps located inside the citadel, 3 in fact, in Sofia, plus Rita Pasha, plus from day 8 onwards, Abdul Karim Nadir in Plovdiv. So I think he's probably going to be able to hold. My thinking is that's likely anyway. But our military moves are for the most part made. They were depicted at the end of the last video, but that's just a bit of a recap, really. They are besieging Adrianople because of the really early actions we took in like 51, 52. We invested quite a lot of money in building up the fortress at Constantinople and Adrianople. And I think this war has kind of brought to the fore the importance of these fortresses, especially Adrianople, which functions as a kind of shield, really, for Constantinople. But I think what we'll do after this war is look to significantly increase the garrisons in those fortresses. They are large, modern industrial fortresses, and in the early 1850s, we had a very fragile, very small economy. It was quite a big investment to do this. A lot of our state revenue for nearly a year was ploughed into this. But it has paid dividends, for sure. And it means that unless the Austrians have an overwhelming force of really more than 300,000-400,000 well-supplied troops with a lot of commanders, they're going to be really hard-pressed to conduct an assault. Even with a force that size, it'd be very difficult. The only way they could really, I think at the moment anyway, given the kind of technological limitations of warfare in the early 1860s, I think to take a fortress like this, unless you have an overwhelmingly large force, they would simply have to wait it out. They'd have to sit tight. They would certainly have to break down the citadel gradually before they even considered an assault. So it would always be a long-term prospect. As such, I don't think there's any significant threat. My assessment is there's no significant threat to Adrianople or Constantinople at this point. Not least because a portion of the force that the Austrians sent off from Salonica was only a fraction of their force. It's still fairly large. I'd say, looking at it, it's probably still maybe 100 to 200,000 men, but the lion's share of their force has been defeated. It's falling back. We're hoping to engage it in the next fortnight, and we've got Rita Pasha set, so we're going to set to hold at all costs, I think, to the north. We're well placed. We're well placed to seal the Austrian force off here. In terms of the kind of Egyptian expeditionary force, then, well, we've got Sinai secured for the time being. The brief Egyptian incursion sort of into Salonica has fallen back, perhaps due to supplies, but they had a reasonably substantial force. I mean, by Egyptian standards, I reckon they would have had a force of 50,000-60,000 men, which pressed out, I think it was towards Saloum for a period of time. But anyway, that has now fallen back. We'll see what comes of that. The expeditionary force that we have, then, is in Constantinople. And it is going to be built around the same force. The Italians, we've got a supply detachment. And what we're going to use is the cavalry division that we've built in Ankara. We're going to move them on rails now. And we're going to move these boys to Constantinople, into the fortress. Plus, we've got 2 independent artillery regiments. I think we'll do the same. Again, we'll look to enter the fortress once there. Now, I'm not sure if we can lift all of this at once, even with the construction of the new transport squadron, which will have a lift capacity when completed of 40, plus we'll have another 40, plus 12, so we'll have 80, 92 lift capacity. What we're going to need, let's figure this out now so that we're not kind of suddenly dramatically surprised, is 40 plus 16, that's 56, plus 30, 50, 60, 70, 86, plus 12 plus 12. So we'll probably have to leave the guns behind, basically. At least, you know, we could still move the guns. In fact, we could probably move the guns, the independent artillery regiments, using riverine points. But the idea is we are going to be looking to launch the invasion from Palestine. The reason being is because the logistics system is already based there. You'll recall that during the early stages of the Yemeni insurgency, we had supply issues. Before we had a kind of merchant sort of a merchant set up in the Indian Ocean, we didn't have maritime means to provide supplies. So the way that we provided supplies was to conduct shuttle runs from Aqaba or maybe just from Jerusalem, using the Red Sea, using sort of supply trains. And that's how we initially maintained the supply. But in order to do that effectively, we invested in upgrading the depot in Jerusalem. That will now serve us as we look to invade Egypt. Supplies will be difficult once we get to Suez. We'll probably look at getting force concentration in the Sinai and then conducting an offensive through Suez into Cairo. At the moment, we don't see any we don't see any Egyptian forces in Suez at all, so we'll keep an eye on that. But yeah, we'll see what happens. But the main thing is to seize Cairo as soon as possible. We could probably do that once we land the force, once we've got concentration in Sinai, they've got supplies and stuff. I think it won't take very long for us to be able to move into Cairo. That's pretty much it. We'll check our... let's set our exports. The war, at the moment, of course, is focused along the tobacco belt and Plevna, so it has affected tobacco exports, which is obviously not good to see. And cereals production, by the looks of it. Of course, a lot of our cereals production is also in the same sort of area. We're going to keep cereals back for the time being. I think that's all good. Yeah, okay, so exports set. Let's just check our assets balance. Yeah, that looks good. So there's nothing sort of flashing red. There's nothing that looks alarming here. All of our demand is being met for domestic market sales. Domestic market sales last turn were 140 units, shifted for 495. That's okay. Exports down a little bit. 84 units for 252, and then imports 30 units for 60. So not great, not terrible, but a bit of a slowdown in the economy. It happens. I mean, there's always going to be little fits and bursts, but nothing too dramatic, nothing to be too concerned about there. I think that's it. What I am going to do in Aden really quickly, we've got 2 turns, we've got a month now until we reach an agreement in Aden, and Aden will become formally a protectorate. We have already got merchants there, so we're going to move now to build a trade post. We've got missions. Yeah, there's nothing else to be done there for the time being. We've got to keep a diplomat back on the basis that we need to make a play in Sumatra. The Dutch are not moving for protectorate status, but they are looking to increase their penetration in the region, possibly with a view to, at some point, looking to make this region a protectorate. Our ambition in the short term is to maintain the status quo. We want it to be a divided and just influenced territory. We don't, we don't want the Dutch having this. And at the moment we have a commercial presence there, which does pay dividends, so we'll leave as is. Right, that's it for early November. That's the military moves made. They were kind of already made. Colonial cards played, economic kind of exports set and everything. So I think that is it. We're sitting at 202 state revenue. We are going to now continue, I think for the time being, investing in not breech-loading rifles, quite yet, but muzzle-loaded rifles, 32%. That's not enough. It's going to cost us 50 per fortnight, but the idea is we want to start speeding that up over the next few years, really. And we are making a lot of state revenue at the moment. So we're hoping that we can absorb this cost. It's not cheap and it's not efficient either, as a way of. But we're falling behind militarily, and the thing is with these kind of wars, we're going to be entering into our 3rd year of war. I think. I mean, the war started in what, January 1860, late January. So yeah, by next year will be the beginning of our 3rd year of war, and we don't want to for the years at a time not be investing in technology. So that's it. We're going to keep the main fleet in the Bosporus, and we're going to keep the raiding fleet, Osman Pasha's fleet, for the time being, because it's we're having some sort of repairs conducted on at least 2 of the squadrons. So we'll leave them as is for now. And that's it. We're going to put you on pause, past turn, and we'll see you in late November. Okay, welcome back. So we're in late November then, and let's have a look at the kind of combat reports. So first of all, in Niche, the small garrison that we had there surrendered. I think they were Bashi Bazooks or something. And Niche is now firmly under Austrian control. They've got a kind of new Western command, really, which they've assembled there. Probably set to move on Sofia, at a guess. They might do the same and move down to Salonica. That wouldn't be the worst thing. Salonica can hold out for some time, I think. If they move on Sofia, I mean, we've got 2 commands that can support them, plus 3 volunteer corps inside the garrison. Still be touch and go, though. It's not a small Austrian force there. But we're not seeing the big doom stacks that we've seen in the past. It might be because their forces are dissipated somewhat. They might have pulled some forces back. It looks like, I mean, Plevna was on the verge of falling. God knows why they didn't prosecute an assault. I mean, there's almost nothing there. There's like, 100 men still holding the fortress at Plevna. When I read the surrender report, I assumed it was Plevna that had surrendered, but it was the garrison in Niche. Niche is not a fortress, of course, but it still had forces inside. Now, of course, the main action then is in Kavala, where we conducted an offensive with 2 of our field commands, Abdi and Omar Pasha, and it was a victory. It was a fairly cheap one. We only lost 5,000 men. And we only really inflict 20,000 with just under 17,000 on the Austrian force. So Karl Ferdinand's force now of 100,000 men, minus 17,000, has pulled back to join the remainder of his force besieging Adrianople. That force is now under strength. It's significantly weakened. It's kind of been defeated in detail to some extent, and is sealed off. Doesn't mean to say that it's impossible for that force to get out, but it's going to get interesting, this. First of all, let's have a look at what our forces are. We've got our forces arrive in Constantinople. In fact, I've already assembled that really quickly. I put these forces together. So this is, at the moment, the task force that's been assembled for Egypt. It will require a commander. It's comprised of 32,000 men. It's an Italian volunteer corps, cavalry division, 2 independent artillery regiments, and a supply detachment. Now, that will be embarked and sent to Palestine, and will join 2 infantry divisions of about 13,000 men apiece. So we're going to have a force of about 50 to 60,000 men to invade Egypt with a commander. I think that is enough. That will do the job. And it's going to take a bit of time to assemble that force, but we are going to start doing that. Let's have a look first of all at the transport fleet that's being constructed. We do have some lift capacity. We could begin to just move it in parts, really, to tell you the truth. By the time this transport squadron is complete, my thinking is, will it not be the case that we could have already assembled the force in Palestine? But then I'm kind of thinking, let's wait for a commander. Let's deal with the situation in Adrianople first of all. It makes sense also to have forces in Constantinople. There doesn't appear to be any rush of the Egyptian situation. They're not doing very much. I did check what claims they had, actually. So if we look at a peace deal, we have a kind of -1 war score because they defeated us outside Alexandria. So we can see what their claimed regions are: Sinai, Massawa, and Solum. So that's, this region here, the kind of border. It's less extensive than I had imagined, but it's the bordering region, really, of Egypt. Solum and Massawa is... we don't even really control Massawa anymore, but it's an area that we have colonial penetration. It's mostly a sort of Piedmont, sort of Sardinian territory. I mean, they have most of the penetration, but nevertheless, because we have a presence there, we have had a presence, they have a claim on that region. They don't even really have control of Sudan. If you look at Sudan, like Egypt, Sudan was a kind of a single sort of polity, really, at this time, but they've lost control of at least northern Sudan. The southern areas which are loyal to them, and the British are already setting up a mission in Khartoum, so we need to keep an eye on that. and British sort of activity in Egypt long term is a bit of an inevitability. It's one of the reasons why we have to be a little bit careful when we consider kind of pressing claims on territory, or maybe kind of playing with the options to do that, because I don't know what's going to happen. One thing we definitely don't want to do until very late game really is to kind of alienate the British. They're a sort of hegemon for the time being. That changes a little bit. I mean, they remain the principal power throughout the period, but once you get to the 1880s, 1890s, you've got new emerging powers. Possibly Germany if it forms, if it unites, the United States. And then it's less of a kind of it's more of a multipolar world, to use a kind of sort of modern parlance, I suppose. So I'm a bit anxious about kind of altering the kind of territorial setup too much in Egypt. Should it have consequences and scripted events or something like that? And I think in any case, if we get sort of transit rights in Egypt, we get them to basically dole out most of their state revenue. For the time being, at least, that could be enough, with options reserved for the future. We should keep the options open, definitely, to look at maybe sort of a more robust kind of approach to sort of politics in North Africa. And for the time being, I mean, we would get transit rights anyway. So bear in mind that transit rights prior to railroads are fairly limited. I mean, to march an army from Sinai to sort of Salonica, it would take such a long time that it would always make more sense to move forces in the Eastern Mediterranean. It'd be faster for us to move a force from the centre of power in Constantinople to the Middle East using maritime means. Even if we move that force in portions, in penny packets, than to have it march even from the lowest route, the southerly route, which is probably Ankara. If we marched a force, it takes such a long time. So transit rights have limited utility, really, and we can supply Salonica using maritime means anyway. I'll have to have a look at the kind of diplomatic options. We're going to have a look now. So treaties will go in effect. Passage right, for example, given to France. That means they can move units on our soil. It doesn't suggest that they can source transit rights through treaties available. Well, let's look at supply right. Okay, so it's going to be the supply right means that presumably we can source supply from their territory, which is even better if we're getting free supply from Egypt. So keep in mind that once we secure peace with Egypt on the terms that we want, once we dictate terms, our relations will become quite high for a period of time because we have transit rights and things like this. And it won't stay low. It'll quickly go into the positive, and on that basis, we can use that as the basis for securing a commercial agreement, supply rights, and things like this. So we would turn them into really a protectorate of sorts anyway. But it will keep the options open long term with Egypt. But I think probably for this time period for 1861, it's been a little bit cautious early on. We've got our hands full with Russia and Austria. It's going to be touch and go with Russia and Austria for the next decade by the looks of it. So, and we don't want France intervening also. We've got to remember that, Louis Napoleon is a pretty belligerent leader. He has, the French were sort of big stakeholders in the Suez Canal as well. So we've got to play it a bit careful. In terms of our military moves then, right, my thinking is we do need to keep forces. I mean, Rumelia, there's a good chance that Austria is going to make a play for Sofia this turn. So that we are on the clock a little bit. They've shifted a lot of their force from Plevna to Varna, and there's a chance they might move they might do a kind of two-pronged assault, one towards sort of Rumelia, looking to open up territory to Adrianople, and simultaneously an attack against Sofia. I think we move now, sooner rather than later. Omar Pasha's force has done a lot of marching, it's done a lot of moving, and his force is somewhat weakened. I think we keep him in Kavala. We move Avdi Pasha, 6-day march, into Adrianople. We keep Omar Pasha set to an offensive posture, even though that reduces the amount of cohesion recovery. We do that anyway, because if Austrian forces fall back, we want them to be engaged instantly. We're going to do the same with Abdul Karim Nadir, and we don't need to do it with Hussein Avni, and we can't do it with Ritza. So I think we do that. We make sure that we keep a cordon around Adrianople, so that if we engage them in a pitched battle, for whatever reason they can outmaneuver us, they try and escape. If they escape into at least two of these three territories, neighbouring territories, they get engaged, basically. There's a chance they might fall back into Gallipoli, down to the peninsula, but we'll have a look, we'll see what happens. Or maybe even Constantinople. I mean, that'd even be even better. They're even further removed then from their kind of base of supplies and support. We're going to keep the fleet in the Bosporus for the time being to stop them trying to escape using maritime means. We've got the fleet set to shore bombardment and interception. And I think that's all we can do for the time being in the Balkan Peninsula. What has happened here? Okay. Yeah, so Avni Pasha's going to make the move. He is well supported. He's going to be supported by the forces inside Adrianople, which is a range of partially constructed. I mean, you've got the garrison and 2 volunteer corps, plus an army corps from Rita Pasha's command, which is being reconstructed. Of course, these guys can't receive replacements at the moment because the fortress is to an extent, well, it is isolated. The district around the fortress is controlled by the Austrians. That's it, I think. Let's just quickly check the raiding fleet to see if these guys are actually getting replacement parts. They are, but not enough. 293, let's check our war ministry. So we need replacement parts. We have one that's currently in reserve and usable. Okay, we are going to have to start tapping to some of our manpower now. We're going to use the cavalry division for the Egyptian sort of task force. We do need a cavalry division prepared for Rita Pasha. We couldn't get one to him for now anyway, not at least using railroad because of the kind of blockage at Adrianople. So we're going to construct one, or begin the construction of one. In, I suppose, may as well the same location. It leaves us with 15. We're also going to look at a few service asset units for the task force. So a field hospital unit won't go amiss. Gendarmerie and engineers. So, I mean, that will increase the kind of weight a little bit, but I'm thinking we're going to have to move this force in penny packets anyway. So, yeah, we'll leave these boys in Ankara for the time being. We can use those service asset units for the construction of the 6th Army, which I think is going to be on the cards. We're not going to make the deadline of constructing 2 field armies by, like, you know, January 62, which is what we had imagined might be possible at the beginning of 1861. That's not going to happen, but we will get the 5th Command fully furnished and get an Egyptian kind of task force. I'm hoping really we want to get this landed by January, so it can conduct a kind of late winter, early spring campaign into Egypt. That's the plan. And just hold tight, I think, probably in Salonica for the time being. We have got a cavalry brigade which was badly damaged, which is inside the fortress in Salonica. Going to get these guys lifted over to Tripoli. Enter the fortress, and inside the fortress then we should be able to receive replacements there. Yeah. It's a depot, a little bit of a very modest one, but anyway. That's our military moves. I think there's nothing else we can do really, but I think we're going to be looking at some significant pressure from the north this term. That's my kind of instinct. We do have, you know, we don't have all the forces in place, but this is a large force, but I think it's possible. I think it's possible that Hussein Avni can hold out. So long as Rita Pasha isn't held off for too long. Yeah, we've got Abdul Karim supporting as well. And we've got 2 field commands supporting Hussein Avni, plus 3 forces, 3 volunteer corps inside Sofia. That's a substantial force. It's going to be 250-300,000 men. And I reckon this is 300,000 to 400,000 Austrians with a command penalty. So, we'll see what happens. That's it. Let's check the economy then. We'll just go through the other reports very quickly also. We lose 2 national morale points because Niš actually surrendered, which doesn't happen often, but occasionally garrisons that are surrounded will surrender. It's always an alarming possibility. Let's keep that in mind. If a really large force turned up outside Constantinople, we might have a really large stock garrison because it could just surrender. We can't control that. That's the alarming thing with sieges. It's not fail-safe. It happens rarely, but in the case of Niš, it's not a fortress and it's a tiny brigade that's surrounded by a massive force of like 300,000-400,000 men. So, I mean, kind of can't hold it against them too much. Right, so 134 units of goods sold on the domestic market for 492, 80 exported for 248, and imports 30 for 60. Let's check our exports now. Okay, we've got luxury goods beginning to ramp up now. Once that hits 20, we'll set it to 15 and we'll look to continuously export luxury goods. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's check our assets balance. We need to give an eye on coal here because Niche is a coal mining region. Okay, we've got 10 imports, so that should be okay. Yeah, everything looks fairly okay there. No concerns. Domestic consumption is basically being met. Domestic demand is being met. Let's check our regional census very quickly. No strikes, no demonstrations, no kind of civil dissent. Just check that again very quickly. Okay, and I think we're a fortnight away now from Aden being moved formally to protectorate status. We've got a colonial merchants plus a trade post going in there. And that will be a big accomplishment for us, really, you know. And one that's pretty been paid for in blood and treasure. Right, I think that's it. Let's have a look at kind of options for agricultural enterprises in the Middle East. Just part of an ongoing kind of project really to develop the kind of Levant a little bit. Tropical fruits. Basra. Yeah, why not? Let's do that. Good. Okay, I think that's it. That's the moves made. It's going to be a lively turn, I think, for action in the Austrian war. So we're going to keep our kind of eyes peeled, see what happens. But we're going to be looking at possibly a significant battle in Adrianople. Again, they might be looking to break off, though. And if they break off, where are they going to fall to? You know, what's going to happen? Yeah, or they make a stand. Or they fall back into an area and they're instantly attacked. So they're in a tricky situation, a really tight spot here. If we manage to destroy this formation wholesale, I mean, it would be fantastic. But there's a good chance they're going to be set to just kind of disengage. I don't know. We'll see. But I'll put you on pause. We're in late November, so we'll pick up in early December. See you on the other side. Okay, welcome back then. We're in early December. And, well, let's have a look at the combat reports. Not quite the titanic round that I thought it was going to be, but there have been some developments. So, as expected, then the main engagement was at Aderne or Adrianople, where Abdi Pasha forced in and attacked the Austrian force, which now looks like it's completely out of supplies. The combined Austrian force remaining there is 200,000. We inflict 56,000 casualties. Not completely cheap. We take 30,000, but we take 2,400 prisoners. Destroy 2 elements. The Austrians have broken off. They're probably set to evade combat, and they're looking to try and pass through Rumelia to return to Austrian lines, probably at Varna, where they do have some security set up there. They've got 4 army corps, plus a brigade, plus a field artillery regiment in Varna. So, yeah, again, it is an era. It's not an era of continuous front lines. Continuous front lines don't really sort of develop really into the kind of 20th century. Really, with the First World War, the attempt to the Western Front for armies to kind of, at the end of the campaign in 1914, to sort of outmaneuver each other, results in a kind of calcified continuous front line. At this time, it doesn't really exist, so forces can theoretically bypass each other. The larger the force that you have in a region, the less likely it is to be the case. Also, having mobile elements provides you with reconnaissance. That also makes it less likely that a force can pass through. Incidentally, Rita Pasha does not have any cavalry, so we don't have any mobile elements to be able to kind of scout, locate, and then vector forces in to the Austrians that are passing through. So they might pull that off. Another Austrian force clearly has broken off from Niche, has done exactly the same thing, but only a portion Talking like a couple of army corps, 3 army corps. This is a fairly conventional sized army. This is the kind of commands that we use, really. These kind of forces that doesn't have a command penalty. It's probably 70 to 90,000 men. That's besieging Salonica. In Salonica, we've got a fairly substantial force of 70,000 men. I'm going to hold tight in Salonica for the time being, because we want Omar Pasha in Kavala. I think we've got to give him another turn. We've got to set him to a defensive posture this time. And I mean, how long would it take him to march across the river? 5 days. We're going to hold tight with him and await events. What we are going to do, however, is begin to prepare the groundwork for our Egyptian commander. So we're going to subtract the commander of his Imperial Guard, and we are going to give that to, let's have a look, Mehmed Rashid. So that restructures his force. Let's get Mehmed Ali Pasha to his kind of command theatre, which is going to be, let's give it to Jerusalem, I think. Days, good. Enter the structure in there. And let's begin, I think, kind of embarking some troops. Let's begin the process then of assembling a force in the Middle East. So we've got a weight of 52. And let's have a look at the task force. So we've got 40. Plus 12, 30. So I guess one of the artillery regiments, right? Okay. So that's a limited transport. That's the most we can transport with the kind of forces we have at our disposal. 18 days. That's set to evade combat, as you might appreciate. And we'll see if we can unload that force into Jerusalem. And we'll do a couple of trips, I think. It's going to take a couple of months, but it's worth starting now, I think. Right, that's good. Abdi Pasha, he's going to have to sit tight. I mean, his force took the lion's share of the casualties, which is 30,000. It wasn't a really cheap victory. You know, it's easy to see these victories as kind of routine. We don't gain national morale from it. I mean, it's close enough, and the Austrians break contacts. We don't destroy their forces. They lose a couple of elements, but it's not enough. You know, I mean, they lose a quarter of their force, but they've still got a really large force. And we are going to do something about it. We are going to pursue the force. We're going to set Abdi Pasha to a defensive posture. Actually, we're going to set him to a passive posture, evade combat, and we're going to put him inside the garrison at Adrianople. That might invite Austrian forces back down, but I doubt it. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. Abdul Karim Nadir is going to move up and pursue the force. It's a 6-day march. He's going to move to Ramelia. And then he's going to move on to, to Varna. His force is in pretty good shape. He's got the support of Rita Pasha. Now, that's a 12-day march. We're actually going to leave Sofia open. We have 3 regiments, or sorry, 3 corps inside, volunteer corps inside Sofia, plus whatever garrison is formed. So we appear up briefly in the face of a large Austrian force. We're going to leave it open. We're going to move to Plevna. We want to engage and destroy Austrian forces, I think. In the kind of northeastern part of Bulgaria, there's Austrian forces falling back. We want to isolate this area, engage them and destroy them. It's only a 2-day march, which is really good. And he can support Varna. How long would it take him to go to Varna? 7. I wonder if it makes more sense to send him to Varna as opposed to Abdul Karim. That's a 12-day march. Yeah, why do that? What's going on? What's going on? Let's get Abdul Karim 6 days into Ramelia, 2 days into Plevna. But then what if, like, 2 days and then he moves to Varna and then the Austrians move to Plevna? That's the thing, isn't it? How long would it take him to go to Plevna? 15 days. There's never an easy solution, is there? Okay then, so Ramelia, 6 days. Varna, 12. He'll be supported by Hussein Avni at Plevna. And Rita Pasha So we've got forces that we're bringing to bear here. We are going to be we do have to conduct this offensive. We want to kind of pinch this area off, seal this force in as much as we can. It doesn't have supplies. It's going to receive, this is going to result in attrition, and yeah, we want to engage and sort of lay waste to their forces wholesale if we can. Yeah, that's it. Avdi Pasha's staying on Adrianople. Omar Pasha's going to await events for the time being. He needs some force recovery, I think. A little bit anyway, some replacements, some cohesion recovery, and then he's going to be conducting an offensive pretty much, on his Todd across a river into Salonica. But we don't want to do this now and then find out that this main Austrian force is heading down here as well. We don't want to end up getting sort of Omar Pasha's force mauled by something that's going to be 3 or 4 times the size of his command. So that's why we want to wait events, see what they do. If we open up Sofia, that maybe invites them to besiege Sofia. That way the force is divided. We nail them in Salonica. We can wheel Omar Pasha around, maybe to Macedonia. He can then support an assault from the kind of east of Bulgaria into Sofia to lift what would be an expected siege there. So that's the idea. Part of this is to try and create a vacuum and invite the Austrians into avenues that we can kind of, where they can be managed. Because once they're in Sofia, the south we've got Omar Pasha, we'll have Hussein Avni and Plevna, Riza Pasha here, and okay, it means Abdulkarim's a bit out of position, but we do have, again, reserve formations that we can call upon in the event of a pitched fight in Sofia district. That's pretty much it. My videos have sort of been getting a little bit long, so I'm going to leave it here. It's one of those games where turns feel like a bit of a cliffhanger, and where, it's a part of just playing it, the videos become really long, because I kind of think, oh, I want to know, I really want to know how this battle goes, I have the past turn, I have to just, one more turn, and it's just a feature of the game. It's why the game's really good as well. It's why you can end up spending hours, because it's hard to stop, even now, I just really want to pass turn and think, what happens? Do we engage this Austrian force and destroy it? What's going to come of this offensive? So, but I won't, because the videos will end up being like an hour and a half or an hour and 40 minutes or whatever, and that's probably not the done thing. So, yeah, I'll leave it there, and we'll pick up. Well, I tell you what, that is the military moves for this turn. So what I'll do before I pass turn is conduct economic administration to ensure that our exports are set and our assets balance is set also, which it looks to be in very good shape anyway. And yeah, so we're in early December now. We'll pick up next turn in late December, so we can see what happens from these moves. I'm not going to be conducting any moves other than what's depicted here, actually. So we'll leave the video here, and yeah, see you in the next video, picking up in late December 1861. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.